And this company and these people are super influential. They go into the really the nerve system of a lot of states. They're in critical positions in the military, within the police force. We need to ask ourselves the questions, do we want these types of people and these types of companies that are also being connected to human rights violations in various countries around the world? Do we want them in these critical positions within our own systems?
Follow the money.
Palantir is one of the most controversial tech companies in the world. The company builds software for intelligence services, armies, and police forces, and works closely with the Trump administration. It's also been linked to serious human rights abuses and anti-democratic movements. And yet, Europe's biggest banks and asset managers not only continue to invest billions in Palantir, they have even ramped up their investments over the past year. That's what Follow the Money journalists Sebastiaan Brommersma, Salsabil Fayette, and Casper Ruffard found when analyzing the financial records of these institutions. This is the podcast of the investigative newsroom Follow the Money. I'm your host Emma, and in the studio with me today are Sebastiaan and Casper. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good to be
Emma.
here.
So the company that we're talking about, Palantir, many European countries depend on it as well, which we will dive into in this episode. Europe is growing increasingly nervous about that. But before we dive into that, what exactly is Palantir? What does it do?
What they do is they build software tools, and what they are able to do is that they can take vast amounts of data that are unstructured, raw, that could be about anything, and they find a way to make sense of all of it, if you will. So their particular expertise lies in military and the intelligence domain. So for instance, if you have a war situation, you've got satellites looking for information, you've got drones flying over, there's observations on the ground, there's all sorts of information coming at you like a commanding officer, and you want to make sense of that. So this software structures the information, gathers it, makes it very easy to go through it, and that makes it so that all these vast troves of information can be sort of boiled down in a sense that the commander can actually see, well, I see movement there. There's probably enemy combatants hiding over there. Who are they? What are they doing there? But also what type of vehicles are they in? And then based on all that information, you can see what ammunition or what weaponry is best equipped to take them out, essentially, all the way up to the extent where you can finally fix your targets on them and even fire at them at some point. So this whole targeting process is where they have a lot of experience and what makes it very effective on a battlefield for a commander-in-chief to carry out missions.
And in making sense of this data, would you say they are like just another tech company, or do they really stand out compared to other similar companies?
Well, they do stand out. And one of the main reasons why they do stand out is not necessarily their software. There's other suppliers, I've been told, that they can essentially provide the same software, but their experience specifically within the field of intelligence and in the military domain, sets them apart from others. It allows them to really get into the nitty-gritty parts of the information that you would need on a battlefield, understand what it is that is needed to make quick decisions, for instance, for targeting procedures. That's where they really excel and where others don't have the experience that they have. And they go into the really the nerve system of a lot of states, also within Europe. They're in critical positions in the military, within the police force. Now, this experience comes from somewhere. It didn't just happen overnight. Palantir was founded partly with funds from the CIA, one of their investment vehicles. And it also allowed them to gain access to critical intelligence information and to military information within the United States that other companies didn't have access to. So that allowed them to build up experience, know and recognize what data is really valuable, for instance, on the battlefield, and turn that into something that can be used on the battlefield.
You already mentioned it, their links to the US government. How does their link with the US government work?
Well, there's loads of links with the US government. First of all, there's the fact that when they were founded, they were supported by InQtel, which is an investment vehicle of the CIA. So they were really there from the get-go within the United States government. But after that, loads of different ties started to exist. So they started to pick up contracts left, right, and center within the military domain, but also within the police. So they were really growing within that structure. But at the minute, there's also a very strong tie between one of the founders of Palantir, which is Peter Thiel, he is considered to be like the mentor of J.D. Vance. He was a very large contributor to getting him elected as vice president. And after Trump got back into the White House for the second time, the contracts that they got for the United States defense, so for the United States military, have really just exploded. I think their biggest contract at the minute is something that can go up to the value of $10 billion over the course of the years. But other than that contract, they have loads more that are like in the millions or maybe in the hundreds of millions. So and the whole defense industry is obviously exploding, and they're right in the middle of that.
And this Peter Thiel that you just mentioned, who is this figure?
So he considers himself to be a very free spirit, but he's also a very controversial figure. He was part of the PayPal mafia, as they are called. That's how he made his first real money. So that's also where Elon Musk made his first fortune, and all the people surrounding there. They have all become, they have all grown to be very influential figures, and also with very controversial opinions about, well, anything really. So Peter Thiel, this character, he already in 2009, he said, like, for me, democracy and freedom can no longer exist together anymore. Yeah. And you have very controversial opinions about, let's say, the value of life and the equality of human life.
But these kind of thoughts and these kind of opinions about how the world works are, I assume, exactly the kind of things that also find resonance within the White House right now.
Yes, they're very strong related to the MAGA movement that is in the Trump administration. It's not just Peter Thiel. Alex Karp, who is the current CEO of Palantir, is quite frankly the same. He's written a bunch of controversial articles and books, and makes very strange public statements about the fact that he considers that some cultures are inferior to others. Karp has already mentioned several times that he feels that it's perfectly fine that his software is being used to kill people, even if that includes civilians. So we got these two leaders of the company that have very controversial opinions and are not afraid to act upon that and carry that out. But at the minute, we're in the situation where Palantir, the company itself, is also embracing these thoughts. And this company and these people are super influential. So we need to ask ourselves the questions, do we want these types of people and these types of companies that are also being connected to human rights violations in various countries around the world? Do we want them in these critical positions within our own systems? Do we trust them with that?
Yeah, and the fact that they're in our critical systems, that's one aspect, and that's one link that Europe has with this company. But then what you found is that there's also a very interesting link between the European private sector and Palantir. What exactly did you investigate about that?
It started with ABP, the very large Dutch pension fund. Yeah. So it's the pension fund for all the civil servants, and it's compulsory. To their credit, you can exactly see what companies they've invested. And I went through them, and I spotted Palantir suddenly on the list. They went from $0 to $625 million in stock value. So that was in the second quarter of 2025, and it kept increasing. That's probably the result of the stock price increase. It increased to 835 million. So that caught our attention, and we spoke to experts on human rights, particularly on OECD guidelines, because what the OECD guidelines do, they ask you to perform due diligence. Mm-hmm. So you need to inventorize what are the risks, and you need to address them. And they found it striking that ABP invests such a large amount in this company at that point in time, because with 625 million euro, that's really high up. And one of the experts we spoke to told us you would expect ABP to have a story around this. This is not a small, obscure company. You would really need to have a story around it.
And how did you go from that Dutch research to then make it a European-wide investigation?
Well, first of all, we have to give huge credit to Salsa on this.
Yeah. Sure.
She did like a ton of work getting all the numbers and having a look at all the European companies that we could find. And we reached out to reporters in a variety of other countries, so Switzerland, in the UK, Norway, Spain, you name it. But everyone was very keen to see, well, what are they actually doing in our country? Like who's pouring money into this? Especially in other countries where you have like these mandatory pension funds, for instance. They also wanted to know like what's going on.
So we found over 100 European companies investing in Palantir. Asset managers, that is pension funds, insurers, And not only did they invest in Palantir, we saw that their investment had increased by 70% over the past year. The total number invested by these over 100 companies that we found was 27 billion, and that should be the minimum, because we know that there is a part we can't see. These $27 billion is largely, we expect, direct investments. A lot of people invest in Palantir through so-called index funds, through big asset managers like BlackRock. And they include Palantir in their investment fund. And we don't have visibility of Europeans investing in these funds indirectly. So that part we can't see. And we approached the 20 biggest investors. We approached them individually, asking for their story. Why do you invest in them? You apply the OECD guidelines. A number of them hid behind the fact that they said, well, basically we are investing on behalf of clients. We are asset managers or we are insurers, and we invest on behalf of clients. But that does not absolve them from the responsibility taking care of human rights concerns.
So you could really see that, let's say, the top investors out of various countries are in, essentially.
And so far, we've talked about the links between Palantir and the US government. But there have, in fact, also been other controversies around this company. What can you tell us about that?
We've looked at investments recently, but the controversy surrounding the company has been there for many years already. So this is not something that is just brand new. I mean, we've looked at Amnesty International reports from as early as 2020, reflecting on 2018 and 2019, where ICE, the immigration service in the United States, was already using Palantir along the border with Mexico, and they were warning for human rights violations because of the use of it. Now, after it, we've seen a massive increase of the use of Palantir software by ICE, and also to a very controversial level where you could just see in whichever area you are, like ICE officer using this on the ground. Are there any possible immigrants around here, up to the extent to what's the possibility of them actually being home and then raiding their house? So this is another warning, which is more recent. And then there's the warnings of the close collaboration between Palantir and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and the allegations that the software is being used for targeting in the occupied Palestinian territories, something that Palantir denies. I should add to that. So there's, as I said, there's loads of specific areas in the world or where there is this controversy. And despite the fact that this has been around for many years, 2025, apparently, for a lot of these investors and institutions, like, well, we would just want this quick buck. Like, we don't need this any more information about this. Or it's fine. It sits fine with us, actually. That's the message that they're sending across.
Are there any examples of parties that did actually respond when being confronted with these human rights concerns?
We have seen some. Not all investment funds have stayed with Palantir. We've also seen some a couple of years ago even that moved away, like the Norwegian Storebrand. They pulled, I believe, $24 million worth of investment because Palantir wasn't willing to answer questions that they raised about what they're doing in the occupied Palestinian territories, for instance.
So you had an investor asking those questions to Palantir and Palantir refusing to respond.
Yeah, and that was reason for them to pull out. So they sold all their stock and just didn't want to have anything to do with it. Another one is I think they're based in Luxembourg.
Luxembourg asset manager.
Yeah. Kendriam, yeah. So they pulled out for more or less the same reasons. And we've seen a Belgian bank that we approached via our Belgian partners at the tijd to one of the banks that has sustainable funds. The sustainable funds, they drop Palantir as well. So within all the other funds that they have, Palantir is still accepted, but in the sustainable ones, they don't want anything to do with that anymore. So you do see that there are people dealing with this money or institutions that are dealing with this money that are pulling away, which makes, well, the question even more relevant. Why aren't the others? What's the difference there? Why do you uphold different standards?
But you have already mentioned a couple of times, we have these OECD guidelines. Aren't they exactly meant to prevent this type of stuff from happening and to only, make sure that we only have these sort of responsible investments?
Yes,
they do. Yeah, it's. I think it's called soft law.
You can't enforce it essentially.
You can't enforce it. But again, most of the top 20 that we investigated have these OECD guidelines on their website.
Yeah.
So that window dressing aspect, like a lot of these institutions just say, you know what, we want what's best for the planet. We want to make sure that no one gets hurt because of all the investments that we made and whatsoever. And it's all very nice window dressing.
So it seems like these concerns, they have existed for a few years without anything really changing. But I think now we're sort of more in the almost cynical situations where we have these enormous investments coming from European companies into Palantir. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we see European governments getting more nervous about the link with the US government. Yep. How does that work, the contradiction?
Well, there's more sides to that, actually. Because what we've noticed when we were reaching out to all these investing institutions is that there was a sense of, listen, if our government is doing business with them, buying their tools, why shouldn't we be allowed to invest in them? Which
sounds fair.
In a way, is a question you can raise for yourself, for sure. I mean, you're responsible for your own actions regardless still, but that's a fair question. But that momentum is changing, at least. So when it comes to France, it was announced that they would like to move away from Palantir in the upcoming years. It's not something that they can do overnight. And it's specifically focused about the work that they've been doing for their internal national intelligence service. This is a painful one for Palantir because it was their first real foothold in this industry in Europe, if you will. The same is happening in the Netherlands. The State Secretary for Defense has mentioned this 2 weeks ago, that he wants to move away from the use of Palantir within defense within 2 years, provided there's a European alternative available. Germany has shut the door on Palantir. They said, well, they're not coming in to the Ministry of Defense. We won't let them in because they will at some point have access to critical data, which is true, which you've also confirmed with the Dutch Ministry of Defense that they actually have this at some point. And on top of that, the Swiss army has also, the Swiss army has been approached by Palantir numerous times over the years, and they have shut the door on them completely as well, stating national security risk or the possible leaks of data, as well as ethical reasons. And that's why they don't want to do business with them. So it will be interesting to see that now that there's sort of like a new momentum amongst these governments thinking, you know what, maybe we shouldn't work with an American company that's in these critical positions within critical points in our society, and that is so closely related to Trump and the MAGA movement, or at least the MAGA ideology. Maybe we shouldn't do business with them. Now, we have to see if businesses or investing institutions will follow suit, or if they will still think, you know what, they're making plenty of money off the American government anyway, so it's still a sound investment. We'll have to see.
And one of the experts that you spoke to even accused Palantir as a company that's constructing a post-democratic order led by a small group of tech oligarchs who do not want to defend liberal democracy but dismantle it. Do you feel like this is a sentiment shared by European governments?
Yeah, is this a sentiment shared by European governments? I don't think to the full extent yet. I think there's a beginning of an understanding, but obviously within governments itself, there's always a big political discussion, like how firm do we want to be with the Americans? Essentially, because if they were to say, you know what, we're going to withdraw from America completely, there's going to be repercussions somehow. Probably economical, I would say, is more likely than anything else. But still, so it's always a tightrope that they're balancing. But you do feel that there's a new dawn or a new understanding, and that it's more acceptable to say, like, we're moving away from American technology. We're doing more to get European alternatives, like. The French are investing in that now in a company called Chaps Vision. And the Germans have also said, again, within the Ministry of Defense, we want to venture off and see if they can probably, or want to see if they can do the job that Palantir is doing for us now. So they're also making a very conscious decision to go for European alternatives, or at least investing in it.
So from what you described, there's almost these two parallel movements where on the one hand, it's European governments that are slowly starting to realize that they really need to move away from this company, while private parties are actually just investing more and more.
Correct. Yeah.
The fact that $27 billion is being invested from within Europe means that $27 billion are not invested in Europe. So they're not going to be invested in European alternatives. So if we keep this up, all of us, there's never going to be a sound alternative.
Yeah, that's something we're still fueling the beast.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, so we need to wake up to that. We need to give European alternatives the ability to work in these places, to build up that experience in which Palantir now tops them. And we need to make sure that enough investments are being made in these European alternatives so they can try at least to keep up, because it's a lot of ground that we need to cover.
And then if we go back to the example of France indeed moving away from them, what does that mean? What is France looking at right now?
Palantir has become political. So what has happened is that the prime minister, so not the president, but the prime minister, he said we're going to move away from Palantir with the internal intelligence services. And because of the whole geopolitical spectrum that we're in, this is something that sits well politically. Because you want to move away, and especially the French, they like it to be independent and do their own thing. But at least the wording is already there, so they're paving the way to actually move away. There are French companies at the moment that could do what Palantir is doing, albeit that they need more experience and they need more funding. And France is now heavily investing in this. They're going to put like 650 million into the development of AI, and part of that goes to development of tools that are could be competitive with Palantir. And that's where it needs to start.
So it seems like the momentum is, we were not there yet, but the momentum is shifting.
There seems to be a change in momentum for sure. Yeah.
And do you feel like that's also the result of this European reporting that has like brought so many issues with Palantir to light?
Yes, I do think that reporting has a huge influence on that. Absolutely. But also just the fact that Donald Trump is now in the White House, and he just simply can't be trusted.
I think there was now also a proposal put forward on the shareholder meeting of Palantir.
Yeah, correct.
That they would have to investigate that due diligence process. And they referred to all the money.
The proposal was denied.
Wait, so your article actually reached the boardroom of Palantir?
Yeah, it did.
Wait, so how exactly did you know that this ended up in their boardroom? Like, did they send you an email like, oh, thank you for helping us understand our own company?
The minutes were made public, and they were shared with us within the group of reporters that we have, and that's how we found this out. And this was just last June, so this is really quite recent. And it was rejected, so they're not going to do any due diligence to see if their tools are being used to harm individuals. But at least the question is being asked.
Yeah. How did you react when you saw that you made it there?
Well, yeah, in a way, I mean, it's good to be noticed, but I think where we really want to be noticed is where legislation is made and where people are calling the shots to buy it or not. I don't think we're going to change Alex Carper, Peter Thiel's mind about the world. I do not live in an imaginary planet. That's just not going to happen. But you do see that it has impact. So that's good, obviously. And I do think reporting plays a large role in it, because you see now that obviously, the reporters that we work with, we stay in touch with, and everyone starts raising questions now. And you do see that governments need to address those questions. And here again, you can see the effect that this collaboration has, where if I get specific information stating, for instance, well, Palantir technicians under certain circumstances need to gain access to certain sensitive information, the same applies in other countries.
Yeah.
Then those reporters start asking questions there and saying, well, you need to explain yourselves. And this starts creating a train of thought. Politicians have to worry about this now. They need to answer questions. And also in Dutch Parliament, the State Secretary of Defense said, well, partly because of the reporting of all the money and the questions that are being asked by Parliament, we are now going to move away from Palantir within the Ministry of Defense within the next 2 years. Like, it's not impossible to move away from Palantir. I do want to stress that. Like they are, what I understand from people that I speak to is that they're good at what they're doing. But we've also seen examples throughout Europe where people have already moved away from Palantir. It's not like, it isn't a silver bullet either. You know, they're good. But there are other things out there, but we need to make a conscious decision to invest in it, both financially, so these investment institutions, but also governments, also by injecting financial injections into these companies, but also by giving them the opportunity to grow and gain that experience that Palantir now has, and they haven't yet. Because if we don't do this, then we're just going to be tied to Palantir forever.
On that note, we'll leave it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, Casper and Sebastian, and I'll be back soon for another episode.
Thank you,
Emma.
You've listened to the podcast of Follow the Money. Our watchdog journalism is funded by our members. Subscribe and support European investigative journalism.